Hello, Kate from Ferret Tube TV here. It's my great pleasure to introduce today's book launch, and it is Kaleidoscope. It's from the Flash Fiction Anthology, and it's actually a collection of authors and has been edited by Fantastic Books Publishing. Some ferret-related blurb for you. Kaleidoscope, the 10th Fantastic Books charity anthology, offers a constantly changing and unpredictable array of colours and shapes, and a wide range of genres and emotions in short bursts, thus reflecting the ever-changing life of the ferret mama as she cares for her furry charges. Kaleidoscope supports the charities Special Effect and Stack Up, which I am also an ambassador for Special Effects. So it's a brilliant collection of stories, and I really hope you enjoy today's book launch.
Fantastic Books Publishing, Kaleidoscope. And this, after roughly 4 years, is the official announcement of the winners of the Flash Fiction competition that has generated Kaleidoscope. But before I tell you who took the prizes, I'd like you to watch a short video where 2 of the authors from the anthology chat with each other and speculate on who will win. I will tell you that they didn't get it right, but when the results were revealed, it did seem as though the hand of fate had been listening. But in a good way or a bad way? You can be the judge of that.
Hi, my name's John Cott, and I'm one of the authors shortlisted in the latest Fantastic Books short story competition. They haven't actually announced the results yet, but by an odd coincidence, one of the other authors on the shortlist is my big sister, Sue Knight. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to check out the competition and maybe try and novel her story if she doesn't notice. So welcome, Sue. You've published 2 full-length novels before, and you're currently in the process of publishing a collection of short stories. So would you like to tell us a bit about your short stories and what it was that attracted you to the short story form?
Well, yes. Hello to my fellow competitor, seconds out of the ring. Yes, you've got me thinking about that now. Well, the collection, which I've written over many years, actually, there are 2 very recent ones, some much older in it. It's going to be called The Umbrellas of Hamelin, and the cover story, The Umbrellas of Hamelin itself, was a kind of collaboration between me and the artist B. Birchill. I wrote the story that inspired her to do a painting, which has become the cover of the book, which was great.
Lovely.
I think my love of short stories probably came from our childhood in the 50s and 60s, when our parents used to get the Argosy magazine. I think it came out every month, and it was crammed with short stories, little extracts and poems. It had some wonderful writers like Ray Bradbury, John Collier, so many. And of course, also that was a golden age for the science fiction short story.
Yes, that's right. So what about the story for the current competition? Did you write that one specially for the competition, or was it something that you've been working on previously?
No, I'd written it a long time ago. It was very short. This was written during our expat years. We lived and worked in the Middle East for 25 years. And I found expat life very strange at first. I felt like I was a Martian who just landed on planet Earth, which I hope I conveyed in the story. I'm also fond of that story because it features our fierce old Saudi cat, Lights. He died many years ago, and he's buried in the sand with a bunch of flowers, so that if anyone finds him, they'll know he was loved. So it's a tribute to him too. So now I'm wondering about your entry to the competition. Did you write it specially or not?
Yes, as it happens, I did write this one specially for the competition. I'm an electrical engineer, and I've spent most of my life working in research. So I've published a few things like technical things like book chapters or some papers in scientific journals, but I've never published a piece of fiction. And coming from a very literary family with 3 sisters who are all published authors, that makes me something of a black sheep in that respect. So I've always written for fun, and I've probably since I was a teenager, I guess, and I've been trying to polish some of those things into complete manuscripts over the last couple of years. So it was very exciting to me to hear that I was on the shortlist and that I was going to get published. It was very exciting news. Yes. The story, yeah. When I read about the competition, I'd just come back from a trip around Japan with the family, and it made quite an impression on me. We visited some wonderful places, and we visited a lovely village in the mountains that was a historical village. It actually had UNESCO World Heritage status because of the old houses there. They're called gasho houses, and they're wooden houses made of these enormous sort of timbers, all held together without any kind of metal fastenings, and have these enormous steep, thick thatched roofs to protect them against the snow. And some of them, I think a couple of them were preserved as museums, but most of them were actually just used as normal houses. And they were beautifully integrated with the life of the village. So one of the main activities was small-scale rice growing, and the rice fields were all kind of beautifully integrated with the structure of the village. There was this really elegant system of stone channels that it caught the spring meltwater from the mountains and then directed it through koi ponds and into the rice fields. Yeah, it was very beautiful. But as we were traveling around, we noticed similar things in other places, in more modern towns and villages. So you realize that traditional life of the small-scale rice farmer, for example, was still a perfectly active and viable lifestyle in Japan. And that was one thing it really struck me, is the way that they've really valued and preserved their heritage. For example, in one place we visited, the trees had wooden props holding up the branches and ropes to protect them against damage from the snow. And the older and the more gnarled and twisted the tree was, the more it was it was valued. So and as I'm getting a bit old and gnarled myself, that sort of appealed to me. So I tried to convey some of those themes in a story with a slightly Japanese kind of flavor to it. But I'd never actually set out to write a short story before. So yes, I did find it quite a challenge, I must say.
Yes, but what did you find the most difficult thing about it?
I think at first it was the rules of the competition were perhaps a bit intimidating, because there was a very strict word limit. And then you had to incorporate, there was a list of quotes on the website from some fantastic books authors, and you had to incorporate some aspect of one of those quotes into your story. The word limit actually turned out to be quite a good thing, because it made me very disciplined about how I edited the story. It meant that if I wrote something that I was really pleased with, and I wanted to include it, then I had to think, if I put that in, I've got to take something else out. So I had to really weigh them in a very sort of disinterested way to say which one actually moves the story forward and which one's just a little bit of self-indulgence. So in the end, that worked out well. And I actually made a bit of a game of it, and I tried to fit my story exactly into the word count. And I also tried to actually include the quote from the other author into my story, sort of word for word. So those turned out to be okay. But no, the most difficult thing definitely was this idea that a good short story should have a kind of a twist or a revelation in it. And it's not difficult, to come up with a twist in your story, but it's very difficult to do it in a subtle way. Authors I like, they don't really tell you things. They just kind of do a few kind of impressionistic brushstrokes that let you almost feel like you're discovering or inventing the twist for yourself. And so, yeah, that was the bit I found the hardest. But in the end, I was quite pleased with the way it turned out, yes.
Yeah, quite sort of Japanese, really, those impressionistic strokes.
Yes, I suppose that's a good point. Yes, I hadn't thought of it that way.
Yeah, and actually that's what I like, I think, about the short stories of form, that it's very disciplined. You can't really waste a word. And yes, the ending's very important. You've got to be going somewhere. Everything in it has to work towards that end. But at the same time, you don't want some kind of clunking twist or moral at the end. So it's not easy. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. I remember there are real techniques to these things. You know, I remember in school they taught us about the difference between metaphors and similes, and they probably taught us a little bit about how to write an essay for an examination. But they never really taught us that there was a process for writing a manuscript. I didn't really appreciate that there was a process until I heard a talk by the author John Brain, and he made it very, very explicit. He had a great analogy where he said that writing a manuscript was like building a big cathedral out of bricks. And the first thing you had to do was collect enough bricks. So that first draft that you labor on so hard, what that was really you just carting wheelbarrow load after wheelbarrow load of bricks to your building site. And then once you got that big shapeless pile of bricks assembled, that's when the real business of writing actually begins.
Now, that is a good analogy, actually, because, yeah, you kind of have to carve the story out of the great massive words you've collected. And this editing is so important. I remember when my first novel that was published, Waiting for Godot, it started with a scene arriving in the Maldive Islands where we were flown. It actually happens flown to a little sandbank in the middle of nowhere. The helicopter left, and then we were looking round for a boat to come. I thought that was a great beginning for a story. And I wrote, really slaved over. But when I finished the book, I realised that was the wrong place for the story to start. That chapter had to start there at all. So you really have to edit, even more so, of course, with short stories, yes. But it's so satisfying when it comes out right. I often have the ending written, and I'm kind of carving my way towards it.
Right.
Shirley Jackson is a master of the short story, and she's got some interesting things to say about writing them, about not wasting words, not getting sidetracked in a short story. You can be more discursive in a novel. One of my favourites of hers is Come Dance With Me in Ireland. Okay. Got to the end, it made me laugh out loud. Which is the power of words. And another story I thought I might mention is something called The Frontier Guards by H. Russell Wakefield. Okay. Very short, but it is so scary that I don't think I'll ever be able to read it again.
Okay. Oh, I'll have to look that one up.
Power of words, yes. Well, you're
yes, I was trying to think about favourite short stories. I remember when I was quite young, probably too young for them, I came across a collection of Saki stories. I can't remember if it was at home or it might possibly have been at our grandmother's house, because I remember she had quite a good library and there was always a lot of books around there. And like you say, there was one of them, the storyteller, which just made me absolutely gasp and laugh out loud, you know, at the audacity of the way he finished the story. It was so good. A different genre I've always also liked is the American, the sort of hard-boiled detective story, the Raymond Chandler or James M. Cain novels, the ones that were made into wonderful film noirs by Hollywood in the old days. And a favourite author is probably Dashiell Hammett. And he wrote some wonderful short stories about a detective, the Continental Op, who's working for the Continental Detective Agency. And he conjured up this wonderful kind of world of very morally ambiguous characters where everything's in shades of grey and nothing's in black and white. And of course, they're very authentic because he'd actually done that job himself. I sometimes wondered if I should try and write a book about being an electrical engineer doing R&D, but I've never come up with an angle that's any good. But maybe if I tried it in a short story form, I don't know.
Yeah, you ought to have a go. There ought to be quite a lot of scope these days if you could come up with that idea, actually. Yes,
it's an interesting one. Well, anyway, looking at the time, I think we're probably getting towards the end of it, so we'd probably better finish up and get back to the competition. So I'll have to say lots of luck with your short story, and I'll certainly be cheering for you to come in second.
Right, same to you with brass knobs on. Don't forget to polish them.
Okay, thanks very much. See you later.
Thank you.
Before I announce the winners, I want to let you know that Kaleidoscope is dedicated to the memory of Neil Boffin, who many of you will know as Boff, a cherished and much missed member of the Elite Dangerous community, the infamous Hammers of Slough, and many an annual celebration of all things gaming and geek. He was taken from us far too soon, and his family have donated the prizes in his memory. We are immensely grateful to them and to him. Fly safe, Commander. Now, I've done things a little differently for this competition. Purists may object, but hey, my competition, my rules. We have 2 guest judging panels from Special Effect and Stack Up, the 2 charities we'll tell you more about later. And so we have 2 winners and 2 of every other placing. As I say, purists might object, but that's what we have. Now, let me just reiterate that the judging for this competition was done fully anonymously. When the stories arrive, a copy is stripped of all identifying information and stored separately, awaiting delivery to the judges. They don't know who the authors are, and neither do I until we put everything together at the end when we have the winners list. And, in reverse order, here are the prize winners. The 2 authors in 5th place are Claire Wilson with Greener Pastures and Kester Robert Park with The Last Word. Congratulations, guys. Now, this next one is hilarious. As I say, fully anonymous judging. Recall those 2 authors jockeying for position earlier? Well, guess what the judges had to say about their stories. The 2 authors in 4th place are Sue Knight with Talkie Tin and John Cott with A Gift from the Sky. I had no hand in this, honestly, but it looks like the fates decided to forestall a family feud and judge them both equally. So congratulations, guys. You can stop feuding, at least for a while now. Onwards to the top 3 places. The 2 authors in 3rd place are Walt Pilcher with Wormhole and Annie Persick with Anyone's Rift. Congratulations, guys. Number 3 in the competition. Fantastic. Joint 3rd. And without further ado, the 2 authors in 2nd place are Mark P. Henderson with Passing Ships and Ian Caldecott with The Camera Never Lies. Congratulations, gentlemen. Fantastic. Really well done to you both. And finally, the 2 overall winners of the much delayed but the 10th charity anthology competition to produce Kaleidoscope. The headliners are Alan R. Payne with It's a Frog Eat Frog World and Angela Calder with Thug. So congratulations to Alan and Angela. You guys are our joint overall winners of this year's competition, and the grand prizes will be winging their way to you shortly. So huge congratulations to everyone who took part. Huge congratulations to our winners and our long list who will also be getting published to create Kaleidoscope. So we'll be contacting all the winners about getting their prizes very shortly. So congratulations to you all. Now a little bit about the collection. Kaleidoscope is our 10th charity anthology and our first based on a flash fiction competition. Instead of a conventional entry fee, writers were asked to make a donation to one of 2 charities, Special Effect or Stack Up. Their donation receipt was their ticket to enter. We did not require disclosure of the amount paid, so can't be precise as to how much was raised, but we estimate the average donation to have been higher than a conventional entry fee for such a competition. And of course, it all goes straight to the charities directly. In the end, 3 separate charities benefited because one entrant misread the rules and donated to a different organisation. It was a generous donation and all in a good cause, so he turned a blind eye to this breach of the rules. Entrants chose from a list of quotations and wrote their pieces around their chosen quote. For a full list of the choices they were given, go to the competition page on our website. The following are the quotations chosen by the authors of the shortlisted entries published in Kaleidoscope. Some authors chose to quote the extract word for word within their stories. Some took the essence of the quotation and built their pieces around it. We hope you'll agree that they all make effective use of the excerpt they chose. Every now and again, a 12-year-old boy wanders along our carriage in both directions, the frequency and intervals of his passing suggesting that he's amusing himself walking from one end of this enormous train to the other and then all the way back again. From Fragments of Joy and Sorrow by Alan Wakeman. When the wind shifts in your direction, you've got to catch it and fly with it like it's your last breath. From The Purple Bow Tie by Elizabeth Reynolds. Early attempts at colonising Mars were clean, as no native population was displaced, but they weren't straightforward. From Generation Mars, Book 1, Blood Red Dust by Stuart Aiken. His engineer mind itched to find out what was going on, and his social conscience couldn't dismiss the potential ramifications. From The Defiant Spark by Annie Persick. I shall move from this world to the next, like a petal blown on the winds of dreams. From Tesserae by B.J. Edwards. It's all about you, motivation and time. From My Dalek Has a Puncture by Simon Fisher Becker. Nestled unobtrusively in the maze of tiny back streets between the bridges Pont Sant'Angelo and Pont Umberto I was the most unrecognisable church in Rome. From The Triple Goddess by Michael James. She licked her lips. It had been satisfying, but the burning embers of vengeance were still smouldering within her. From The Shadewood series by Drew Wagar. Sitting in the garden as the sun goes down. From Faith by Christian Danvers. And finally, the mystery quote from a book as yet unpublished. What do you do when the iron's hot? Ah yes, you should strike.
I'm Walt Pilcher, and two of my pieces were selected to be included in the Fantastic Books Publishing flash fiction anthology, Kaleidoscope. What can I say about them? Well, ordinarily, I'd be tempted to read an excerpt from one of them, but that exposes a conundrum. Since it's flash fiction, really short, why not just read the whole thing? It wouldn't take that long. Some of the authors may do that, but if all of them did, then you wouldn't need to go out and buy the book. And we do want you to buy the book. So no reading for me. I'll just leave you with these thoughts. What if you were a 15-year-old science fiction nerd and a wormhole suddenly appeared in your bedroom? What would you do? And that leads me to wonder, does Pluto have time zones? Is it evening on Mars? Imagine the sunsets of billions of stars. Intrigued? Of course you are. So go out and get your copy of Kaleidoscope as soon as you can.
Hello, I'm Mark Henderson. This is a little piece of description about my fiction piece, Passing Ships, which is to be included in FBP's new anthology, Kaleidoscope. Now, I didn't know about this. Anne-Marie, the marketing and promotions official of FBP, contacted me some time ago to tell me that my little contribution was included in the new anthology. And I thought, what contribution? What anthology? I'd submitted it some time ago, presumably when invited to do so, and completely forgotten about it. So I said, oh, well, I've got a piece there that I'd written. I look forward to reading it. And so Anne-Marie sent it to me, and I thought, oh, yes, I remember it now. It's my age, it was written, Passing Ships was written, goodness knows, 4 years ago, I should think, when I attended an evening with mostly writers. This is a 40-minute drive from where I live, but there was a cracking group of people. And one member of the group had had some success at publishing flash fiction, so she ran a flash fiction workshop for us. And I wrote this little piece to share with the others and essentially forgot about it. I had it saved. And then when news of the anthology Kaleidoscope came along, I thought, oh, well, perhaps that will suffice, and sent it in. And lo and behold, it's been accepted and for inclusion in the anthology. I'm delighted. And it all came as such a surprise to me. Of course, FBP have produced a number of anthologies. I believe this is the 10th. And I've been involved previously in 2 of them. Back in 2016, I think that's the date, I first came across an FBP competition. This was for a 666-word horror story. And I dashed one off and looked at it and thought, yeah, maybe, and sent it in. And it was actually considered good enough to be included, which was lovely. And I'm very pleased about that because it kind of got my foot in the door with this publishing house. And since then, they've been very kind and published a few of my books. The second anthology with which I became involved was started 3 years later. This was an amazing winter scene that was presented to us, saying, there's your inspiration. Now write a short a fantasy horror fiction piece not exceeding 2,000 words. So I thought, really interested in doing that. Anyway, not to worry. It's a competition. So I went to my creative writing students and said, look, here's a competition. Anybody want to go at it? And they all said, well, I don't write horror stories. And I said, look, if you have a go, I will. So several of them did, and we sent out a batch of stories, and it was rather successful because 3 of our stories were included in the anthology that came from that. That's the anthology Dread Cold. I think the most recent one that FBP have produced, until Kaleidoscope, which is this year's. So there we are. I seem to have made a contribution to my third of FBP's 10 anthologies, and I hadn't even remembered sending out a contribution to it. All goes to show that you don't always remember the good things in life.
Hello, my name is Glenda, and this is Kester, a published author and my husband. Kester, can you give us a brief introduction about yourself and your journey as an author?
Sure. Well, I'm from Scotland originally. I lived in Yorkshire in England for 10 years, where I studied for my creative writing degree. And now I live in Quito in Ecuador. I've been here for nearly 10 years. I've been working in education all this time, and I'm currently focused on children's ESL online.
Okay.
In terms of my journey as a writer, I think that I wanted to be a writer since I was about 4 years old, and I must have been pretty clear about it because at one point an aunt of mine gave me a fully bound hardbacked book as a birthday gift. I remember that it was almost square. It had a red kind of fabric cover to it, and these glossy off-white pages inside. And I wrote my stories directly into the book, and eventually presented them to my primary 7 teacher for her to read. And that was a humble beginning for me as a writer. And I'm still in the humble beginnings as a writer. I've now got 7, nearly 8 stories published by Fantastic Books Publishing, and I'm working on my debut novel.
How things differ from when you first started to now? I mean, the process of writing has changed a lot in terms of the ideas that you had at the time, the ideas that you have now as an adult. And since you're working with children as a teacher, have you thought that you might want at some point to focus on writing stories for children, or doing some kind of writing that involves children?
Things definitely have changed. In terms of what I write about, I think that a message has worked its way into my writing. I think my writing is very moral, but I think that it's rather chaotic in the way that it expresses these moral ideas. So that I don't want it to be a lecture. I want it to be a story which has a moral fiber to it. You know, the things that I write have gotten longer, I think, as my confidence has improved. As far as writing for children is concerned, I think it's there. I feel like I have some kind of grasp of how children think and the kind of stories that they enjoy. But I wouldn't want to be limited to that. I would want the opportunity to go beyond that and say something more complicated, more profound.
Right. Okay. How do you usually approach the process of writing? Do you follow a specific routine or have any rituals?
I wish I had a routine. The routine is that I use the bits of my life that aren't committed to other things for writing. I used to be a kind of late night person, and then at that time in my life I wrote, sort of very late at night into the early morning, and now I'm an early morning person necessarily, and so I tend to write early in the day before things get started. I mean, if procrastination can be a ritual, then yes, I've got a ritual.
Okay.
There's always a period where I kind of sit in front of my computer and I kind of try to feel the story and trying to get into it. And sometimes I get into it, and sometimes I produce a lot, and sometimes I just can't get into it, and I have to do something else.
Right. Okay. Your story in Fantastic Books' upcoming anthology, Kaleidoscope, is called The Last Word. What's it about, and where did you find the inspiration for it?
Okay, so The Last Word was provoked by a natural phenomenon. About 30 yards in this direction, there's a forest that I walk in regularly. And in the forest there are these very, very tall, narrow trees, and when the wind blows, they bend, and it makes this creaking noise that's just like a door opening in a haunted house. And Neil Gaiman said that his answer to the question of where do your ideas come from is this idea of confluence, things coming together. And that's the confluence that is behind this story. This question of what does it mean for a door to open somewhere above your head in the middle of a forest? A door opening is something that's very much an internal phenomenon. What happens when you take it outside? What does it mean? Who's coming through the door? Where are they coming from? Why are they coming? And then as I started to work on the story, this voice emerged, a very authoritative voice. The kind of respondent to these characters that are coming into the forest. And this voice is a powerful voice, and they have I don't know how to put it. I've lost my thread.
You keep going. Okay, so they got something.
They got what the message that came from this character that I'm trying to talk about is it's actually about rituals. It's about the rituals that we have and the rules that we impose upon ourselves. And the question is, when you strip those rules away, do you decrease yourself because the rules were kind of building you up and making you more than you are? Or do they actually release you from something that was restricting you in some way? So I guess it's about, the story is in some way about the function or the role of the rules that we follow.
And if the rules are who we are, part of who we are, if they are just there to complement us. I know you've been writing a novel for the past 3 years. How does the experience of writing a novel differ from crafting short stories? Because obviously this is a long piece of writing versus short stories. We're talking about 500 words, sometimes 1,000 words, but this is massive, right? So how do they differ?
I mean, the main difference is that when you write a short story, you get to the end of it. And when you write a novel, you don't ever get to the end of it.
I mean, you eventually will get there, right?
In theory, yes, you get to the end of it eventually. But this novel is at this point in its second draft. It's now 94,500 words, and it's not finished yet, and it probably will get longer before I finish it. No, it's just a joke. So I wanted to draw on another quote from another great writer.
All right.
It's Ursula Le Guin, and she said that art is something that an artist creates to say something that they cannot say in words. A novelist is an artist who works in words, so a novelist is somebody who uses words to say something that cannot be said in words. So whether you're making a short story or a novel, there's always something in that story which is beyond words. And I think when you're writing a short story, it's an image, it's a feeling, it's a direction, it's a mood, maybe it's a small revelation, something like that, a picture postcard. But when you write a novel, this kind of wordless entity that exists inside what you're writing is something much bigger. It can be a personal philosophy. It can be something much more profound and more complex than what you can get into a short story.
Right.
So dimension, I suppose, is the main difference.
What are some of the challenges of writing a novel? I mean, because I presume that writing a short story is not that easy, but I mean, the challenges might differ from the ones that you're facing now as a novel writer, as it were.
For sure. I mean, with a short story, you can probably do it in one sitting if it's really short. And when you go back to edit it, you can edit it in a single sweep, work through from beginning to end, and feel that you've made an improvement, hopefully. Even if it's 3,000 words, 4,000 or 5,000 words, you can still work through the whole thing and feel like you can grasp the whole thing in your mind. Right. But once you get past a certain point, you can actually get lost in your own creation. It can become bigger than your mind can really contain. And I think that's what's been the big struggle with writing a novel, is that you honestly can get lost in it, and feel that, you know, there needs to be two of you. There needs to be one of you to guide yourself through the process, and there needs to be one of you to do the actual work. And so in this second draft, I've developed a technique of creating medium-term plans to get myself through segments of the novel. So I created a 1.8 part plan, and I followed that through from beginning to end. And then as soon as I finished it, I created another 11-part plan, and I'm now following that 11-part plan. And when I get to the end of that, I'll be about 2/3 of the way through the novel, and I expect I'll then immediately create another plan to get myself through the next section.
All right. Okay.
Of the
Great.
book.
Were there any lessons you learned along the way that you wish you had known when you first started writing?
Gosh. Any lessons I wish I had known before I started? I mean, when I started this book, I thought it was going to be 20,000 words long, and now it's 5 times that.
Okay.
So naturally, I think I wish I had known that it was going to be a novel before I started it.
But isn't it more exciting not to know? I mean, just to get into this boat and get lost, God knows where, and then just realize that you're not writing a short story anymore, and now that you're, you know, somewhere else.
You're right. It is exciting, and because you're lost in it, I suppose you're constantly trying to find yourself in it, and that causes me as a writer to kind of explore more. I suppose when the frame is relatively small, you don't get lost, and you pretty much just continue the direction that you set for yourself at the outset. But when the dimension is so impossibly large that you can feel like you're in the middle of nowhere in the middle of this novel, I go on little adventures with myself. I go on. There are quite a few kind of moments in the book which I had never planned for, which are totally spontaneous. And it would be lovely if they make it into the final draft of the book, because they are genuinely the product of novel land, you know, a place that I visited.
And you keep visiting.
And keep visiting. Yes.
Okay. So what are your future plans as an author?
Finish the book.
Okay, well, that's good. Okay.
You know, this first draft feels kind of silly and self-indulgent, but it also feels like it's trying to say something that's really important to me. So when I sit down to work on it, I do have enough drive to push me through to the other side. I don't feel like every word is precious, but I do feel like it's a worthwhile project. It's like the thing I was talking about before, that the non-verbal message is really the important part of it. The actual words seem to matter less.
Okay.
After that, I will emerge into the fresh, sweet air of a brand new day.
Okay.
A world where I don't actually have an ongoing project, and it'll be for the first time in years when I get there.
Right. Okay.
I could go back to some attempts that I made on a novel previously that I still think are valid efforts. I could do something completely new. I could attempt something avant-garde. I could write a collection of short stories.
Okay, but nothing is being said yet. I mean, there's nothing like completely specific for the moment.
No, I'm just totally involved in the toil of producing this book and trying to bring it into the world one way or another. And one way or another, I will make this story come alive. But after that, well, you know, I think I should probably just take a some time off,
Right.
and have a think about what comes next.
Well, taking a break is never a bad thing. It will help you in your process of recovery, because I'm sure that you're pretty much anxious to get that free time, that spare time back. That then it might be the beginning also for something new, to start something afresh.
I think it could be a period of self-collection.
Okay.
Somebody much cleverer than me said recently that when you work on a single project, and it could be any project over a long period of time, it's essentially a collaboration between your earlier self and the person that you become and the people that you become during the project. When that project is over, I get to revert to being a single person again as an artist. I get to collect myself. And then, as you say, then I get to find out what's next.
Very inspiring. Wow. Thank you very much for this chat. I really enjoyed it, and good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Alan R. Payne, and I've been writing stories for Fantastic Books competitions for over 6 years now. It was very exciting in 2017 when my story Trains of Thought was shortlisted and published in the collection Dreaming of Steam. Since then I've entered every competition, and my stories have been included in every charity anthology that Fantastic Books have produced. Each competition has a theme, and I enjoy trying to think of stories that fit with the idea that we've been given. The latest competition set the task of writing a 500 words or less flash fiction inspired by quotes from Fantastic Books publications. I submitted 3 stories, all of which have been shortlisted. The first quote I selected from the list was, "Nestled unobtrusively in a maze of tiny back streets between the bridges Ponte Sant'Angelo and Ponte Umberto I was the most unrecognizable church in Rome." It reminded me of an obscure little church we discovered in Crete on our way to a well-known tourist destination. The story of how we found it is in the road less travelled. Very often, if you look around, you can discover something remarkable, only just off the tourist beaten track. If you ever have a chance to see the Mona Lisa, don't be so focused on the enigmatic portrait in front of you that you fail to look back at the magnificent Wedding at Cana by Veronese, filling the wall behind you. The next quote I looked at was from Stuart Aiken's Mars series. Early attempts at colonising Mars were clean, as no native population was displaced, but they weren't straightforward. To paraphrase JFK, Mars is fascinating, not because it is easy, but because it is hard. I've worked on the ideas in It's a Frog Eat Frog world before, and it's been interesting capturing the essence of a story in only 492 words. Desperate times call for desperate measures, which are darkly hinted at in a stand-up comedy routine. My final story, The Carrot Fly Machine, was inspired by the quote, "Sitting in the garden as the sun goes down." How does a carrot fly, with a brain the size of a pinhead, manage to distinguish the smell of carrots from everything else and lay its eggs in the right place? The brains of insects containing thousands of neurons have been fully mapped, but we still have a long way to go to describe the billions of neurons and connections in the human brain. In the story, Layla hopes that Simon will pay more attention to her than to a computer-controlled drone that is looking for the carrot patch. I'm really looking forward to reading the Kaleidoscope collection and finding out how other writers have interpreted the same quotes, and I hope you will too. Thank you.